before we start, the official recording, very quickly, can you please tell me in Genesis 1 where it says and it was evening and it was morning in Hebrew? In Hebrew, are they using the Hebrew words for dusk and dawn there?
Mm-hmm.
You
Boker,
remember?
yes, Boker, and Erev, yes. Mm-hmm.
So we can't say that this is the same word, let's say, that refers to the mixing of the light. It's a clear, they're using the clear words for dusk and dawn. So they're
Erev,
making it very sure that we understand that first dusk is coming and then dawn is coming, day one. Eh?
yes. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
All
Yes,
right.
because on the very first day in Genesis 1:1, it isn't Boker, it's pure light. So the very first moments of Genesis 1:1 is not a mixture. It's pure OWR light, or OWR. And
Yeah.
then the Boker that you find in verse 5, that is introducing the beginning of the second day. Boker is what closes off the last day, the first day, and it starts the second day.
The dawn, you mean, the dawn.
Yes, that's Boker. Boker is always dawn. It's not after sunrise. Boker never ever has the definition of some light after sunrise. It's always before. Mm-hmm. There's a couple of words, Makar and Shakar and Boker. Makar and Shakar can also mean before the sunrise, but it depends on the context of the verse. You have to look at that because they can mean after the sunrise as well. They're not used.
Makar.
Yeah, Makar and Shakar, they're not used very often, just a few times. Well, I don't know, maybe even 4 or 5 times, if that many, right, Tim? It's not very often.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we could say that it's a more generalized word for morning. Generally, could be before sunrise, could be after sunrise, let's say.
Yes.
Morning hours.
Morning hours, yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so maybe we'll just leave this part in.
We could. Why not?
Yeah,
I mean, we're
why
being
not?
spontaneous here.
Okay, well, it's been 2 weeks since we saw everybody, and we're back to have a good time.
Yeah. Exciting presentation in front of us.
Yes. So
I'm gonna, yeah, and sorry, Charlene, and I'm gonna let everybody know that it's Tim's favorite presentation. Here, there. I get you, Tim.
It is. It's mine too.
Okay.
Is there anything else? I'd like to give a little review, but is there anything else, Maria?
No. I
No.
think we can review what we have been presented so far, and can move forward.
Oh, okay. So just for the audience, so that it's a little bit easier to follow if they're first-time viewers, we're going to be looking at the next part of the 12-hour offset. But first of all, I just wanted to mention that all 4 Gospels are part of this puzzle piece. It isn't just one of them, but all 4 of the Gospels are going to work together to solve this puzzle. And for sure, there was no burial before sunset. Absolutely not. You're going to see that. Absolutely no burial before sunset, like a lot of us have been taught. Another thing that we find is that the word preparation day in the King James is going to have a small p. Some of the other versions have a capital P, but when it says preparation day, it is always covenant Passover. Always covenant Passover. That term, preparation day, is only used 6 times. Once in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John is using it 3 times. And every single time it is talking about the covenant Passover day, not the lunar one, okay? Only John talks about the high Shabbat. The other writers will just say Shabbat, but you have to use John to know it's the high Shabbat. And with Passover being on the midst of the week or Wednesday, the high Shabbat is always the next day, the 5th cycle, or a Thursday. This part of the study is going to introduce the women and why they're so important. The women, there's 2 groups of women, but the women have to prepare spices and ointments And this is what actually pulls everything together on a Wednesday Passover, Wednesday crucifixion. It's very interesting. So we'll get to part of that today. And we're going to end with the light season of the weekly Sabbath for both the covenant calendar and the lunar calendar, showing the 12-hour offset between the Passover, the high convocation, the unleavened bread convocation, and then the preparation day before the weekly Sabbath. So we're going to go all the way up to the light season of the weekly Shabbat in this this PowerPoint today, and then next time we're going to carry on from that. I think there's 75 slides. There's lots of detail, but I think it's going to be easy to follow. So there's some repetition to get us going, and I think that's it. I think we're ready.
Great, let's start.
Okay, let the show begin.
Thank you, Charlene. Well, there's 78 slides today.
Oh, 78. Okay.
That's what happens when you give me a PowerPoint.
It stretches.
Very quickly.
Okay, come on. There we go.
Hope everybody enjoys it.
Yes, indeed. This is my favorite part of this whole study. I love this section. Dating the Crucifixion Crunch. And yes, it is a detailed edition, part 4. And the question right from the beginning, again, is Common Era 30 the year of Yahusha's crucifixion? We're going to be sifting the sands, if you will, for scriptural facts. Will Common Era 30 underscore the crucifixion's uniqueness through the 2 Passover blueprints? 2 Passovers? Where do we read that there's 2 Passovers within 24 hours? Keep your eyes open. We're going to see it. We will pick up our investigation, starting with a couple slides from the ending of part 3. Please consider that Yahusha's sandals sometimes spoke much louder than his words. Yahusha's sandals often hammered out the Torah's impact. Frequently, his spoken words were physically heard, but simply not internalized. Can you hear the deafening thunderclap of Yahusha's sandals? His words, I bear witness of it, that its works are wicked. Are we going to see this? Better yet, are we going to hear this from his sandals? Has man's lunar doctrine destroyed our eardrums for discernment? Yahusha HaMashiach is in the business of restoration that includes our discernment. Here's from slide 3, just as a reminder. Why did Matthew write the festival? Has another power usurped the festival calendar that belongs to Yahuwah? Are we discerning Isaiah 14:13, where it says, let me sit in the mount of meeting? That's Har Moedim. The adversary claimed that he was going to control the feasts and festivals of Yahuwah. How did he do it? What did he remove and what did he insert when he said, let me sit in the mount of meeting? Why did the scribes and Pharisees not say, we will not crucify Yahusha at Yahuwah's festival of Passover? Again, are we paying sufficient attention to this seemingly super insignificant detail seen in the very generic identification, the festival? Are we putting too much emphasis on the festival? Please wait until the end of this set of studies to set judgment and answer to this question. Why? Because your answer just might be impacted. Here's a couple reminder slides from part 3. I put these in so that we can recall of the charts that are coming up. This dark triangle represents the lunar-based sunset to sunset night season. This blue triangle represents the lunar-based sunset to sunset light season, which follows the night season, and it takes on the shape of a parallelogram. There's your two sunset to sunset markers, and this will be one 24-hour sunset to sunset cycle. And you'll notice that the dawn is at the center. The dawn is the morning, Boker. So there is your parallelogram of a sunset to sunset cycle, one 24-hour period. Next up, we will overlay man's sunset to sunset format over top of creation's established day start design, which is the covenanted dawn to dawn foundation authorized by Yahuwah, established at Genesis 1. This calendar rectangle represents the dawn to dawn 24-hour cycle as Yahuwah established at creation, but of course minus the pagan name. That pagan name is here for your cycle timing recognition purposes only, just so we can understand where we're at. And yes, of course, it's Boker to Boker or dawn to dawn 24 hours. You're now going to see the sunset to sunset triangle symbols in this format. After the sunset, this triangle begins the first 12 hours and the twilight and the night portion of their 24-hour cycle, because their sunset to sunset system, the night starts first. This blue triangle represents the following morning and afternoon portion of the 24 hours. This is their light season. We need to remember this format breaks Yahuwah's covenant from Genesis 1. And to get more information on that, very pertinent information, I ask you to read Jeremiah 33:20, where you'll understand and read about the covenant of the light season and the covenant of the night season. Man seems to disregard that. So again, there's your two sunsets, and that is your one sunset cycle in the parallelogram laid over top of the covenant calendar cycle of Yahuwah. So I ask you to please remember this format to understand the following charts. So let's get into it here. The sentence implemented. It's dawn of Abib 14, and yes, indeed, it's 24 hours dawn to dawn. So we're looking at that blue triangle. That's our focus at the moment. It's lunar Abib 13. That's the date. That's the 12-hour offset. So on this lunar Abib 13 calendar is when Yahusha was impaled. Mark says here, Mark 15:25. And it was the third hour. That would be the third hour from dawn. And they impaled him. So on the covenant calendar, it was Abib 14, according to statute. And on the lunar calendar, different date, it was Abib 13. It was not on their festival. They declared that they were not going to crucify Yahusha at the festival. Well, they held up to their words, because according to their calendar, which they reckon time with, it was not on the festival. Again, it's Abib 14, and this is the look at the grand volunteered sacrifice. This is under the Melchizedek covenant, Mark 15:25. And it was the third hour, and they impaled him. Again, the third hour from dawn. And this is my appointed time. That is what Yahushua was referencing in John 7, verse 6. My appointed time. The midst of the week, Abib 14. My appointed time. And darkness reigned. Darkness. It's Abib 14. And this is under the order of righteousness, or Zadakah, Mark 15:33. And when the 6th hour came, darkness came over all the land until the 9th hour. That's the 6th hour from dawn. And again, you see that blue triangle here? That's 12 hours of lunar Abib 13. This is when the darkness came over all the land. My dark appointment. I lay down my life. I lay down my life. Nobody took his life. If he did not lay down his life, nobody could have touched him. We need to remember that. Think about that very carefully. I lay down my life were his words. Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani. Mark 15, verse 34. Remember, this is in the lunar Abib 13 light season, which is the covenant calendar Abib 14 light season. These two calendars were operating simultaneously together, 12 hours offset. Different dates, same light season. Mark 15:34. And at the 9th hour, Yahusha cried out with a loud voice, saying, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which is translated, my El, why have you forsaken me? And yes, this is spoken at the 9th hour from dawn. Luke 23:46. And crying out with a loud voice, Yahusha said, Father, into your hands I commit my spirit. And having said this, he breathed his last. His words, I commit my spirit. If he had not have committed his spirit, neither the Romans nor the Pharisees and the scribes could have touched him. But he said, I commit my spirit. He gave up his life. It was not taken from him. Remember the decree of the Pharisees and the scribes? But they said, not at the festival. They were not going to crucify Yahusha at the festival, lest there be an among the people. Yahusha expired at the 9th hour on Abib 14, and that is on covenant dawn timing, in exact accordance with Genesis 1. Yahusha released his spirit on the lunar date of Abib 13 at approximately the 21st hour from the sunset of Abib 12. It's two entirely different calendars, 12 hours offset, side by each, in Common Era 30 only. No other year can this be achieved or seen or even come close. Common Era 30 is the only year that this happens. Yet, two different calendars, both of these operated and functioned simultaneously. This is the incredible miracle of what we see written in the scripture. When Yahusha was suspended, when he was lifeless on the tree, let's have a look at Mark says here, Mark 15:37. And Yahusha cried out with a loud voice and breathed his last. And the veil of the dwelling place was torn in two from top to bottom. And when the captain, who was standing opposite him, saw that he cried out like this and breathed his last, he said, truly, this man was the son of Elohim. He became a believer at that point. An earthquake combined with the crucifixion events caused an aura of confusion and terror to reign. What happened next in terms of calendar timing? What celestial event determined by initiating the start of the Jews' lunar Abib 14 feast date? Could it be a sunset? Is this same celestial event that which caused John to record the second preparation, yet functioning simultaneously with the covenant Abib 14 light season? What made this 12 hours of preparation very peculiar? Again, covenant Abib 14, the preparation of the Pesach, dawn to dawn, midst of the week. The lunar preparation initiated. Let's have a look here. There's a dark triangle. That's the Abib 13 night season, and the light colored triangle, it's still Abib 13 on their lunar calendar, and yet it was not on their lunar festival. There's your lunar Abib 13 12-hour overlap. It was still covenant calendar Abib 14, and this is the same light season where Yahusha expired. 12 hours difference, 12-hour date difference, but yet the same light season. So what happens next? The sunset. We mentioned that sunset just a minute ago. This is the sunset. In sunset tradition, the lunar 13th date had changed to Abib 14. The double Pesach revelation, a double Pesach. Covenant Abib 14, preparation of the Pesach. Exodus 12 and Leviticus 23 speaks about this preparation of the Pesach. John announced this at dawn. John 19:14. Yahusha expired in this light season, according to Abib 14, in Zadakah, or in righteousness. He did it according to statute, according to the covenant. So the light season, or the direct sunlight of Abib 13 went away. The sunset occurred. John 19:42 reveals, at the point of sunset, the lunar-based preparation of the Yahudim had commenced. They thought they had successfully murdered or crucified Yahusha on their lunar-based Abib 13. They now, after the sunset date exchange, they began their counterfeit lunar feast of Abib 14, Passover. Again, not at the feast. We need to remember those words. Yahusha expired on the midst of the week, Abib 14, in righteousness. This is Daniel 9:27, prophecy fulfilled, midst of the week. That sunset is incredible what it does. Matthew 26:5 and John 19:42. With that sunset, we see scriptural alignment accomplished. This immense feat can only be realized by implementing Yahuwah's dawn to dawn, as established at Genesis 1 and throughout the rest of Scripture. Also, this fascinating scriptural fulfillment can only be realized in Common Era 30. No other year nor calendar combination can achieve this incredible challenge. I'll state that again. No other year nor calendar combination other than covenant calendar, as compared with the lunar calendar of the Jews, can achieve this incredible challenge. Matthew, what does he say after sunset, 14? And when evening came, evening, that's Erev, that's a mixture. How do we know this? Well, we go back into the Evan Bohan edition of Matthew. That's the Hebrew edition of Matthew. And in that edition, it says Erev. It's just another level of accuracy. This is a time when darkness is overtaking the residual light. This mixing event can only occur after the sun has removed itself. So what is said there? Matthew 27:58. He, that would be Joseph, he went to Pilate and asked for the body of Yahusha. Then Pilate commanded the body to be given. Note, he did not ask for the body until after the evening had already came, after the sunset had happened. I want to take attention here. Yahusha's body was not even requested for until after the sun had set. I also would like you to note that in this time after the sunset, it was Abib 14 covenant calendar, and it was Abib 14 on the lunar calendar. 2 calendars operating simultaneously and together for 12 hours. How is it that we have been deluded by the false doctrine that the body of Yahushua was slammed into the tomb before sunset? Why slammed? Because the body had to have customary preparation protocol of the Jews. That customary preparation was the body must be meticulously cleaned to the point where if they had to bring it in the tabernacle, it would not defile the tabernacle. That body had to be spotless. Every speck of dried blood in the hair, in the pores of the body had to be removed. It had to be clean. How could they do that before sunset, especially when the body was not even requested for until after sunset? And yet we are taught he was put in the tomb before sunset. This customary preparation protocol of the Jews for a corpse included Yahusha's body. And was it purposely ignored or deleted? Was it? Is that how they would get him in the tomb before sunset? Would this deleting action allow sunset to sunset reckoning of the lunar-based origin? Would that allow that? Erev is a mixing. Might the correct knowledge of Erev be one of the keys to understanding? When his body was not requested until after the Erev mixture, that brings truth to the words of the scriptures. When we understand that, that brings alignment with the words. If trusting people are coerced into believing Yahusha's body was not cared for properly, and Yahusha's body was put into the tomb without correct preparation, would this calendar adjustment referencing John 7, verse 6, would it promote, allow, and enable the counterfeit first convocation of unleavened bread to begin at sunset? Would that work together to form a counterfeit calendar, a counterfeit doctrine? Would that lead people astray? Let's have a look at a word about Mark. A word. Very, very important here. Mark's words contain a key. Mark is going to lead out using the word preparation with a capital P in chapter 15, verse 42. What cycle of the week is this preparation day? Many people understand preparation day is always and only the 6th cycle as the preparation day before the weekly Shabbat. I used to believe that until I started studying the words of the scripture. Understanding that the preparation day can only be a 6th cycle or a Friday is not true, not according to the scripture. Any cycle before a festival Shabbat or convocation is also called a preparation day. Notice the small p. Yahusha's Passover took place on the 4th cycle, the day before the unleavened bread convocation, or the high Shabbat. When you see preparation day, think Yahusha's covenant calendar Passover of Abib 14 as the 4th cycle, or a Wednesday in pagan terms. We must be careful when we read about the names with a capital or a small letter. It's very important to notice this and understand the differences. Mark, look what he does. When is, according to Mark, when is sunset? Mark 1, verse 32. He's very defined here. He tells us explicitly. And when evening came, when the sun had set, evening came and the sun had set, they brought to him all who were sick and those who were demon possessed. Mark is ultra clear. Evening is after the sunset. He makes no mistake. Why is that important? Well, let's read Mark 15, verse 42. And when evening had come, because it was the preparation day, that is the day before the Shabbat. Verse 43, Yosef of Ramathaim, a prominent council member who was himself waiting for the reign of Elohim, came and boldly went into Pilate and asked for the body of Yahusha. So we're going to dissect a little bit here, Mark Zabib 14, the preparation. Let's look closely at this verse. I want you to notice first the when. When was it? It was after the sun had set. Mark 15:42. And when evening had come, evening, that's the mixture. That can only happen after the sunset. Very, very clear. Second note, the what. Mark gives the night season a very defined classification. How did he define this classification? Mark 15:42, because it was what? It was the preparation day. After the sunset, it was still the preparation day, according to covenant calendar. Third note, the where. It was what? It was the preparation, and they were preparing for what? Mark 15:42 again. That is the day before the Sabbath. So what happened to that sunset? Why did it not change the day or the date? It was still the preparation, and it was before the Shabbat, and this is after the sunset. Why did the sunset fail to change the date? Why? After the sunset, and it was still before the first high convocation of unleavened bread. It was after the sunset, and it was still the preparation. Did Mark's documentation just blow a hole in the sunset doctrine? Did it let in a little bit of light? Inherited lies or traditions of our fathers. We've all heard them. Has it occurred to you this specific sunset failed to change the calendar date? It is in strict accordance to covenant calendar, covenant scripture of the Torah. Interestingly enough, both covenant calendar and the lunar counterfeit calendar were fully synchronized for 12 hours of Abib 14 preparation. When? After this sunset. This incredible factor is only possible in Common Era 30, and it's only possible with the dawn-to-dawn understanding of the covenant. At this point of sunset, had Yosef requested Yahusha's body, which was still hanging on the tree? And also, how were the Yahudim breaking the statutes for the convocation of unleavened bread after the next dawn? We're going to look at that. Just some questions to lead us in to our thoughts. But for the moment here, let's have a look at Luke. Is Luke in agreement with the first two witnesses? Luke 23:50. And see, a man named Joseph, a council member, a good and righteous man. He was not agreeing with their counsel and deed, from Ramathaim, a city of the Yahudim, who himself was also waiting for the reign of Elohim. He, going to Pilate, asked for the body of Yahusha. And taking it down, he wrapped it in linen and laid it in a tomb hewn out of the rock where no one was yet laid. And it was the preparation day, and the Shabbat was approaching. Notice that word, approaching. What time of the 24-hour period is he telling us when he says the Shabbat was approaching? The first convocation of unleavened bread was approaching. What is the original Greek word? for was approaching. If we look at the interlinear scripture analyzer here, it says that that word is epiphosko, and its definition is lighted up. G2020, epiphosko, to grow light. The first convocation of unleavened bread grew light. That's what the scripture says. So we're going to look closely at this. We're going to bring up the sunset version being first. Pay close attention to the light or the darkness. The sunset edition here, if you notice on the left, the Abib 14 night season starts out first in accordance with sunset theory. And the light season of the crucifixion follows that. Then we have a sunset. Yahusha expired at the 21st hour from sunset. No, you won't find that in your scripture, but according to sunset theory, this is the hour that he would have died on, the 21st hour. Matthew and Mark recorded the body of Yahusha was only requested for after the sun had set. Now, the question is Luke in agreement? Luke 23, 52 to 54. The body was requested, retrieved, wrapped in linen, and rapidly placed in the tomb before sunset. Notice the question marks. And he says, and the Shabbat grew light. Is there a problem here? How is it that after the sunset it grows dark? Yet Luke declares that the Shabbat grew light. Why the darkness? Is there a problem here with sunset? Let's look at the light that was seeded from Genesis 1:1, where the dawn starts the day. On the left, you'll see the light-colored square. That is the Abib 14. That's the light season of the crucifixion, midst of the week. The red marker is where Yahusha died. Then comes the sunset. Luke 23, 52 to 54. The body was requested, retrieved, meticulously wrapped in linen and spices, and placed in the tomb according to the type. That would be in Exodus 12:10, before dawn. Before dawn. That's during the night preparation for burial. Then we see the dawn coming. That would be the Shabbat. Luke records, and the convocation grew light. The Shabbat in the New Testament, it grew light. Epiphosko. It begins to make sense now. The Shabbat did not grow dark after the sunset, but after the dawn, the Shabbat grew light. Dawn to dawn. Yes, Luke is in full accordance and agreement with Matthew and Mark. Yahusha's body was placed in a clean tomb before dawn, just as the first convocation of unleavened bread was about to epiphosko, or grow light. Has it occurred to you that Luke is in full agreement with Matthew and Mark on the preparation burial night season being still Abib 14? The night of burial was not the first convocation of unleavened bread, as sunset to sunset dogma indicates. What startling record will John reveal? John's account of the believing Yahudim. Yes, there were a small number of Yahudim who were believers in the covenant. The greater portion did not. But let's look at this, what John has to say. The body of Yahusha was still suspended on the tree. This places the time frame before sunset. Why? The legs of the other two still had to be broken, and it was after the sunset that Joseph requested and received the body from Pilate. So what does John record? John 19:31. Therefore, since it was the preparation day, that the bodies should not remain on the stake on the Shabbat, for that Shabbat was a high one, the Yahudim asked Pilate to have their legs broken, that they be taken away. They wanted the legs broken. They were believers of dawn starting the preparation. The time frame is before the sunset. In John 19:31, the believing Yahudim declared this light season was that of Abib 14, the preparation. It would be the preparation of the Pesach that started at dawn. They were believers. They, understanding that the bodies should not remain on the tree in the night, wanted the men removed before dawn. Why? It was preventable work that needed not be performed on the High Kodesh convocation of unleavened bread. It also started at dawn. Epifosco, to grow light. Then we're going to have a look at the piercing, John 19:30. So when Yahusha took the sour wine, he said, "It has been accomplished." And bowing his head, he gave up his spirit. Therefore the soldiers came and broke the legs of the first and of the other who was impaled with him. It's before the sunset, John 19:33. But when they came to Yahusha and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Why was it he died so quickly? Could that be according to the plan, so that his legs were not broken, so that the statute could be fulfilled? I come not to destroy, but to fulfill were his words. And he said, it has been accomplished. John 19:34, let's continue. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and instantly blood and water came out. Water. Would that be the Mayim Chaim, the water of life? Because it is through his death that we were given life, the water of life. The second Passover, within 24 hours, a second Passover. Look for it, because it is there if you pay attention to the words of the scripture. Sunset lunar date exchange. After these recorded events, the sunset occurred. How do we know this? By John's recording of the start of the feast of the Yahudim. How did he declare that to us? John 19:42. There, then, because of the preparation of the Yahudim, they laid Yahusha because the tomb was near. This is in the night season. And he's telling you that after the sunset, it was still a preparation, and it was also the preparation of the Yahudim on their lunar calendar. Their lunar Abib 14 started at sunset, and it ran at the exact same time for 12 hours as Abib 14 covenant calendar. This is the 12 hours, or the 12-hour, lost my words here. This is the 12 hours that the two calendars operated simultaneously. The sunset event occurred, and according to the sunset to sunset dogma, it ushered in the traditional preparation feast day of the Yahudim. So what is the controversy here? What did Yahuwah declare about the Passover? Leviticus 23:1. And Yahuwah spoke to Moshe, saying, speak to the children of Israel and say to them, the appointed times of Yahuwah, which you are to proclaim as set apart gatherings, my appointed times are these. Verse 3. 6 days work is done, but the seventh day is a Shabbat of rest, a set apart gathering. You do no work. It is a Shabbat to you in all your dwellings. These are the appointed times of Yahuwah. Set apart gatherings, which you are to proclaim at their appointed times. Who appointed them? Yahuwah appointed them. Context here. It's the right of ownership to the feast. Leviticus 23:5. In the first month, on the 14th day of the month, between the evenings, is the Passover to who? To Yahuwah. Have you seen any mention of the Yahudim here? Has Yahuwah shared his glory with another by assigning the feast of Passover ownership to the Yahudim? When in John 19:42, John wrote, the preparation of the Yahudim, did he forget the Torah? Had he never read Leviticus 23? He did write the preparation of the Yahudim. What is he telling us? Had John already delivered the key to thousands of years of calendar controversy before our very own retinas? Has John revealed a brilliant flash of spiritual light in that this Abib 14 of the Crucifixion had 2 Passover feasts within one 12-hour period? 2 opposing calendars operating simultaneously on a 12-hour offset. Sunset lunar date exchange. Again, it's still the midst of the week. It is well after the 9th hour when Yahusha had exclaimed, "It has been accomplished." Amid the aura of confusion, the sunset event took place. On covenant calendar, Abib 14, at this point of sunset, the lunar-based Abib 14 Passover of the Yahudim commenced. Passover of the Yahudim is not the same as the Passover of Yahuwah. Yet, after the sunset, it still remained covenant Abib 14 for another 12 hours until the dawn start of the unleavened bread convocation. But we need to back up so as to not miss out on an extremely important point. Let's examine John 19:38 to 41. But let's recall first, Matthew, Mark, and Luke all record it was after the sunset that the body of Yahusha was requested from Pilate. So the big question here, will John fall into alignment here too, or is John marching to the step of a different drum? John 19:38. And after this, Joseph of Ramathaim, being a taught one of Yahusha, but secretly, for fear of the Yahudim, asked Pilate that he take the body of Yahusha. And Pilate gave permission. Therefore, he came and took the body of Yahusha. And Nakdamon, who at first came to Yahusha by night, also came, bringing a mixture of myrrh and aloes, about 100 pounds. Why does Scripture document by night? Isn't that an insignificant detail that we do not need? How come it's written in Scripture? Maybe we should look at this. Why does it tell us that Nakdamon came the first time to Yahusha by night? What was his mode of operation? Continuing on, John 19:40. Then they took the body of Yahusha and bound it in linen wrappings with the spices, as was the habit of the Yahudim for burial. John is making certain that that body of Yahusha was looked after according to the custom. Its body had to be meticulously clean, spotless. Verse 41. And at the place where he was impaled, there was a garden, and in the garden a fresh tomb in which no one had yet been laid. Is John in agreement with an after sunset burial? He does agree with the custom of the Jews for burial, and that takes a very long time. Yahusha's body was not slammed in the tomb. Yahusha's body was meticulously clean. It was cleansed to the point of being spotless. First, let's have a look at the mindset of Nakdamon, and it's recorded as operating at night when in affiliation with Yahusha. Why at night? Was he scared of being identified? His intention was to obscure his works from any recognition and consequently the oppression of the Jews. He did not want to be excommunicated. He did not want to be removed from the synagogues. He did not want to be recognized. He was working under the cover of night. If Yahusha had been buried before sunset, Nakdamon's night effort for bringing the very high value of ingredients for the burial would have been moot. Second, John informs us the lunar-based preparation of the Yahudim was in full swing, which could only begin after the sun had set, and that's in accordance to their dogmatic tradition. It becomes very important to note now that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are all solid witnesses to the 12-hour calendar offset and the after sunset burial of Yahusha HaMashiach. No, John is not writing about a different crucifixion. He is documenting things in terms of Roman reckoning. We're going to be looking more at that. But John is in full agreement with Matthew, Mark, and Luke. Make no mistake. So who is it that would have us to believe in a Friday before sunset burial, which can be twisted to promote a Sunday resurrection? Who would be worshipped on a Sunday? Forward to the next evidence. John records it was the preparation of who? Of the Yahudim. And they placed Yahusha in the tomb. That tells us it's after sunset. What was Torah's timing statute in the type which Yahusha must fulfill with perfection? When he said it has been accomplished, what did that entail? It was that statement, and was it inclusive in prophetic manner to the correct fulfillment of this statute also? And what statute would that be? Here's the type of the Passover lamb, Exodus 12:10. Did Yahusha have to fulfill this too? Here's the command about the Passover lamb. And do not leave of it until morning. That would be boker in the Hebrew. And what remains of it until morning, you are to burn with fire. There is a very distinct process that need to be fulfilled. It had to be taken care of and put out of sight. Because come morning, the epiphosko, the growing light of the unleavened bread, would bring another festival. It would not be Passover any longer. The lifeless remainder of the Passover lamb must be processed and properly placed out of sight before dawn. Did this happen? What is recorded? Here, Luke stands tall. Luke 23:53. And taking it down, he wrapped it in linen and laid it in a tomb hewn out of the rock where no one was yet laid. Notice this is pointing to the night season just before dawn. This is also in strict accordance with the red heifer sacrifice type. This is another fulfillment of Scripture with the red heifer requirements. Again, it's just before dawn. And what does Luke write? Luke 23:54. Remember, just before dawn. And he writes, and it was the preparation day. Again, that sunset did not change the date nor the day. So how come we are taught differently? Dawn grows light, and it was the preparation day, and the Shabbat was approaching. There is your Abib 15 convocation of unleavened bread. This is the convocation or the Shabbat that was approaching, that was about to grow light. Covenant calendar, Abib 14, was about to end with the dawn. The high convocation of unleavened bread was about to epiphosko, or about to grow light. It does not grow light at sunset. It grows light at dawn. Abib 15 was approaching, G 2020, to grow light. The unleavened bread festival begins here. When? At dawn. The offset calendar date exchange. It's Abib 14. It's the date of the crucifixion. It's covenant calendar. It's John 19:14, midst of the week. We're looking again at the sunset event. The sunset brings in the lunar-based Abib 14 preparation of the Yahudim, John 19:42. The dawn is there, Boker dawn, epiphosko, to grow light. And we see the Abib 15 covenant calendar and the Abib 14 preparation offset. Let's have a look. There's the dawn with the blue line. That's the epiphosko, to grow light. We bring in the Abib 15 unleavened bread, fifth of the fifth cycle, and we read in Leviticus 23:6, on the 15th of the month is the moed of unleavened bread. That's the day after the 14th, the day after the Passover. Yet, overlapping for 12 hours was the lunar Passover preparation morning of the Yahudim. This is their lunar calendar, 12-hour offset from covenant calendar. So on the unleavened bread convocation, or Shabbat, on that morning, it was still Abib 14, the lunar preparation. 12-hour offset. Separate calendar, different date. Lunar Abib 15, let me back up. Abib 15, unleavened bread, and the lunar preparation. Again, there is our Abib 15, unleavened bread, the fifth cycle. On the 15th of the month is the moed of unleavened bread to Yahuwah. On the first day, you have a set-apart gathering. Note these words: you do no servile work. Unless, of course, you have a different calendar and a different date on a lunar-based system. Is that what Yahuwah says? No. He says, this is my moed, and you do no servile work, period. There is no exceptions. There is no other calendars besides a counterfeit one of man, the lunar calendar. So the question here is, on the Abib 15 Shabbat, or on the convocation, which is still Abib 14 on the lunar preparation, what were they doing? What were the scribes and Pharisees doing? What servile, self-serving activity were the Pharisees and their Kohen HaGadol doing on Yahuwah's set-apart appointed morning? Were they breaking the command? You do no servile work? Matthew 27:62. On this Abib 14 lunar calendar preparation, what were they doing? Mark documents here, Matthew documents, chapter 27, verse 62, on the next day, which was after the preparation. Yet, it was still Abib 14 on the lunar calendar. It was still a preparation on the lunar calendar, even though Matthew declares on the next day, which was after the preparation, the chief priests and Pharisees gathered together to Pilate, saying, Master, we remember while he was still alive how that deceiver said, after 3 days I am raised. So the question here is, why did they not start the count and request at the prior sunset if Yahushua was buried before sunset? Why did they wait until the next morning? Maybe they knew when Yahusha was put in the tomb. But that's not what we've been taught. This next verse, who was this business negotiation action serving? Was it serving Yahuwah, or was it serving another god? Would that be the god of the lunar system? Matthew 27:64. Command then that the tomb be safeguarded when? Until the third day, lest his taught ones come by night and steal him away, and should say to the people, he was raised from the dead, and the last deception shall be worse than the first. They were trying to cover their trail. They did not want problems. They were guarding their own belief system. Was it okay to ignore the statutes of Yahuwah because it was not at their lunar-based feast of unleavened bread? For them, on their lunar calendar, it was still lunar Abib 14 morning light season on their offset lunar calendar. Question number 2. On this Abib 14 lunar preparation, is there any scriptural example or evidence at all of Yahusha recognizing the authority of a lunar calendar or any other calendar as well? Did Yahusha recognize the authority of the feasts of the Jews, or did he go up into the midst of the feast? Was he witnessing against their lunar calendar? Fifth cycle date exchange. As the first convocation of unleavened bread light season passed by, the sunset arrived. The lunar calendar of the Yahudim demands that the sunset changes the date. Let's look at it. Recall here, this sunset, and just before it is the lunar Abib 14 lunar preparation. What comes next? Yahuwah's fifth cycle, steadfast. It was still Abib 15 unleavened bread of the fifth cycle. When you see down here in this triangle, it was still Abib 15 unleavened bread in covenant calendar. On Abib 15, calendar of the covenant, scripture clearly reveals many times the sunset changes nothing other than the atmospheric light conditions. It remained Abib 15, feast of unleavened bread, until the next dawn. What about the fifth cycle date change? Whose date was that? Again, after the sunset, it is Abib 15 covenant calendar, and it is now, because of the sunset, Abib 15 on the lunar calendar. The lunar calendar of the Yahudim. Sunset arrives, and with it, the start of their lunar-based Abib 15 feast of unleavened bread. Again, a note once more. Both covenant calendar and lunar calendars functioned simultaneously for 12 hours, and this is only in Common Era 30. There is no other year nor calendar combination that can achieve this. It does not exist. Yahuwah's preparation at dawn, the sixth cycle. At dawn, again, that would be Epifosco, to grow light. I left the Friday indication there because that is for our recognition purposes only. This is going to be Abib 16, the sixth cycle. And it will be dawn to dawn. It will be 24 hours. We bring in Abib 16, preparation of the sixth cycle. The convocation of unleavened bread commenced at dawn. It's a very special event that occurred on this cycle. What was the second reason for the sixth cycle preparation? The second reason besides for the Shabbat. Was there another reason for a preparation? Yahuwah's intentional preparation for the sixth cycle. What other intention was there? What was also being prepared other than for the Shabbat on this Abib 16? Mark 16 verse 1 records, and when the Shabbat, which is the convocation according to Torah, and when the convocation was passed, Miriam from Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Yaakov and Shalomah, bought spices to go and anoint him. They bought spices on this Abib 16 preparation cycle. Is that going to run a problem with the lunar calendar? Is it okay to purchase spices on Yahuwah's preparation cycle? Yes, on Yahuwah's preparation cycle, it's just fine. But what about the lunar calendar? What problem does that present? What if that preparation for Yahuwah was also a lunar Shabbat? Watch this purchasing of spices. So when we look over here, we see the Abib 14 lunar preparation. That's on the Abib 15th, the unleavened bread on the fifth cycle. There's your dawn to dawn, your 24-hour period. Next up is Abib 16. It's the preparation cycle, the sixth cycle of the week. What happens with the lunar calendar? If we look here at the sunset, the lunar unleavened bread convocation, or Shabbat, would have started at sunset. So here we see in this red triangle right here, the red triangle in the light season of Abib 16, the preparation cycle, on the lunar calendar, this blue triangle here was still a Shabbat. Are you allowed to purchase and mix spices on a Shabbat? On this covenant calendar preparation light season, it was still, by sunset theory, still an Abib 15 lunar convocation. If the ladies were observing the lunar calendar, they would have defiled the statute for the convocation by purchasing spices. That's no problem, ladies. Just purchase spices after the sunset. Is that any better? After the sunset? Well, it changes the day according to their lunar calendar. Would there be a defiled statute? Let's read Exodus 12:16. And on the first day, that's the first day of unleavened bread, is a set apart gathering. And on the seventh day, you have a set apart gathering. No work except for the mixing of spices and the purchase of it is done at all on them. Is that what it says? No, it does not. It says no work at all is done on them. Only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared for you. So were the spices to be eaten? No. The spices were for another purpose. And it is on the first convocation of unleavened bread that these spices were purchased according to the lunar calendar. But it is on the covenant calendar, it was a preparation when the spices were purchased. In terms of personal activities for servile purposes, only one type of work is acceptable on the Kodesh convocation of unleavened bread. The labor in preparation of food for immediate use is acceptable for Yahuwah. Any labor outside of this area is not acceptable, which certainly includes the great amount of effort in purchasing, that would be commerce, and transporting and mixing of spices. So this presents a very serious problem for the lunar calendar believers. How do they reckon this? Attention, lunar followers. Watch this, please. Take note here. This is the lunar unleavened bread convocation, this blue triangle, and it's on the Abib 16 preparation cycle on covenant calendar. So watch this blue calendar, or this blue triangle. The sunset happens after this blue triangle. On covenant calendar Abib 16, the sunset arrived. In sunset lunar tradition, Abib 16, the seventh day Shabbat arrived with the sunset. There would be a convocation and then a seventh day Shabbat at the sunset, according to lunar tradition. There is the triangle that would bring in the lunar seventh day Erev Shabbat at evening. They declare the Shabbat starts at evening. So now you have a convocation or a Shabbat before sunset, and you have a seventh day Shabbat after the sunset. When did they purchase spices? Which Shabbat did they break to purchase, mix, and transport their spices? Back to the Kodesh cycles. One annual convocation, and the next, a weekly seventh day Shabbat night. Again, when did they purchase their spices without breaking the commandment? There's a problem with the lunar calendar. How about you? Are you purchasing the spices? Think about this. First, there's the convocation, or a Shabbat in the New Testament. Sunset happens, and that brings in the seventh day Shabbat on the lunar-based sunset to sunset calendar. Convocation and a Shabbat. You're purchasing the spices. Which day, which commandment are you going to break? Did the ladies break the statutes and purchase, load the cart, and drive the animals to transport the spices? Remember, the animals are not required to work. We're not supposed to make them work on the Shabbat either. And they would unload, carry the spices into their dwelling, and proceed to mix up the ingredients on Yahuwah's Kodesh cycles. There's a serious, serious problem with the alignment on the scripture if you're considering the lunar calendar. A very serious problem here. Which statute would have been broken when the ladies bought spices and caused the work to prepare the ingredients? Exodus 12:16. That's what would have been broken. This light season was a lunar convocation overlap for unleavened bread. This night season was a lunar seventh day Shabbat, according to the sunset to sunset system. And the question, did the ladies perhaps receive a special exemption from Yahuwah for observing the appointed times because Yahuwah was not capable of planning the situation out perfectly from Genesis 1:1? He could make the end from the beginning, but he was not able to plan out this preparation day appropriately to the statutes that he made. Is that what we are required to believe? Was this a great big oops by Yahuwah? Sorry, I can't attribute that to my creator. Would he say, go ahead, you can break the statutes on this exception just once. Next time I will do better, I promise. No, that sounds too human to me. No, the lunar calendar simply fails with a catastrophic implosion trying to find alignment with the scripture. So what's next? Let's back up a few slides. Again, we're looking at the fourth cycle crucifixion, midst of the week. Next comes the Abib 15 unleavened bread, the fifth cycle. That's the convocation, the first convocation of unleavened bread. Dawn arrives with that blue line. Then comes Abib 16, the preparation. It's the 6th cycle of the week. This is the calendar of the covenant. Mark 16:1. And when the convocation, or the Shabbat, was passed, Miriam from Magdala and Miriam, the mother of Yaakov and Shalomah, bought spices to go and anoint him. They did this on the preparation cycle. They had 24 hours dawn to dawn to prepare, to purchase, transport, prepare, and do whatever they wish with the spices. It was a preparation day. It was the day to do this activity. This was planned out from the very words of Genesis 1. The very first word, Bereshit. It was planned from that point. Our Yahuwah, his definition is perfection and nothing short of it. We cannot miss that. Yahuwah designated 24 hours of preparation time to purchase and mix their spices in perfect compliance with the Torah statutes of Yahuwah. It was already built within the plan of salvation from the beginning, from the very first word, Bereshit. It was planned from the opening moment, from the time that voice was spoken. We're going to pick up on the 6th cycle at the arrival of Erev Shabbat. This is a repeat from slide 61. There's our sunset on Abib 16, the preparation cycle according to Yahuwah. That sunset comes along. On covenant calendar, Abib 16, the sunset arrived. In sunset lunar tradition, Abib 16, the 7th day Shabbat, arrived with the sunset. Please note the question marks. With it comes the lunar 7th day Erev Shabbat. Next, we will look at the date exchange according to Genesis 1, dawn to dawn. Dawn brings covenant calendar, Abib 17, Shabbat. Note, there's the Shabbat. Abib 17 Shabbat was on the weekly Shabbat that we well understand today. Dawn brings covenant calendar, Abib 17 Shabbat. There it is, we bring it in. Abib 17, 7th cycle Shabbat. The light of dawn brings forth the 7th cycle Shabbat with Yahusha resting in the tomb. His witness to timing was about to bring life. Life brought out of his death. He witnessed even in his death. When he says, I bear witness of it, he was not exaggerating. His sandals are what speak. Are we listening to his sandals? His sandals speak from the tomb. Abib 17, 7th cycle Shabbat. Shabbat is a full 24 hours ending at dawn. You read about that in Matthew 28:1. At the end of the Sabbath, as it began to epiphosko, to dawn. Yet here, the lunar calendar's Shabbat, Abib 16, overlapped into Yahuwah's Shabbat. Same light season, one lunar calendar, one covenant calendar, 12-hour offset. So this is the end of part 4. What are we going to expect coming up in part 5? The events of the 7th day Shabbat on Abib 17. What happened on that Shabbat? When was Yahusha resurrected? What events reveal clearly what would happen on the day after? Yahusha meets with Mary while it is still dark on the first cycle of the week. The first ascension timing and the reason for it is going to be looked at closely in part 5. The first ascension, have you heard that there was 2 ascensions? The first one being on the first day after the 7th day Sabbath, and the festival time the appointment that goes with it. Have you looked at that closely? Did you realize that Yahusha was the first identity to observe a feast after the crucifixion? We're going to be looking closely at this in part 5. I thank you for your time. I know it is precious. And if you have any questions, please send your questions to questions@studythecalendar.com. And I say shalom to each one of you. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Tim.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
How was it? How did you understand, Maria? How did you do?
I do understand. Yes. I understand.
There's a lot of information, a lot of details, and I expect it needs to be gone over closely again, to
It
understand.
needs a lot of studying. It needs a lot of studying. Yeah.
The 12-hour offset is so absolutely incredible. It extremely accurately defines the two calendars and the year of it. It's just it can't be mistaken. There's no other calendar that can even come close to that accuracy. It's just not even possible.
Indeed, I agree. Tim, I have one question dash clarification that I would like to ask you, because I will go now and study this again, read the Gospels, go through them, and parallel them with your presentation. In John 19:31, am I here? I'm here. Yes, in John 19:31, it says that it's a preparation day when the Jews ask for the breaking of their knees.
Sorry, what verse? 1941?
31.
19:31.
Oh, 31.
It says the Jews, because they didn't want the bodies to stay up on the cross on a Sabbath, on a high Sabbath, clearly. It was a preparation day. Because it was a preparation day, they asked for the legs to be broken. So to me, it's very clear here that while Yahusha was still on the cross, it was the preparation day of the Jews before sunset.
Not before sunset.
Correct?
No, not before sunset.
So you're saying that it was already night after sunset when they went to Pilate and asked for the legs to be broken?
Maria, we have to be careful here with Jews. We have to look at the context. There's two groups of Jews, and I think we've talked about it once before, I'm not really sure, but between verses 31 and 42, there's two different groups of Jews. So we have to get the context right here. Okay, so
Shirley, you're saying that here on John 19:31, the Jews that are mentioned are the good Jews,
the believing ones.
The believers asked, why? Why did they care? I mean,
that was a statute. That was from the Torah, that the bodies could not remain on the tree all night. Okay, now the bodies could be on the tree on after sunset, but they knew that these have to come off because the next day was the high Sabbath, or convocation of unleavened bread. So between Simon and Nicodemus, they must have had some other helpers with them that were believers. They're not mentioned, they're not written down.
This is one of the verses that we understand. There were Jews at that time that understood the covenant and were abiding by the covenant. They were upholding the statutes here, and they wanted it done properly. And that Yahusha's body was still hanging on the tree. That they needed it removed before the high Shabbat of the next morning also. That body was to be removed from the tree. They wanted it taken. This shows that there are believing Jews at that time. Their numbers were very, very few. Their numbers were very, very few, but they were there.
But then further down on verse 36, it says, because it was written in the scriptures that no bone of his would be crushed.
Yes.
So how could these believer Jews ask for his legs to be broken, since it was written that no bone of his would be broken?
Oh, no, his legs weren't broken. This is the two that were crucified with him. The other two that had not expired yet.
It wasn't the believing Jews that asked for his legs to be broken. It was the unbelieving.
Confused me. I'm confused now. It says here that Jews asked for his for his legs to be crushed. You're telling me here that these are the believing Jews.
No, the unbelieving Jews would be the ones that asked to have the men's legs broken.
Yeah, but I'm saying that when they asked, if they were unbelieving Jews, the time that they asked was the preparation day. That's what it says.
Mm-hmm.
So preparation day was already when Yahusha was still on the cross. It was their preparation day.
Can I just say that whether they were believing Jews or unbelieving Jews, all of them would have believed that if there's a Shabbat or a convocation coming on, that because they were taken off the cross, they were taken off the tree, and they would want their legs broken so that they have no way of getting away. Crucifixion often took 2 or 3 or 4 days. Many of them did die for many, many days. And so they would be taken off the tree, but if they're going to be taken off, their legs would be broken so that they wouldn't be able to go anywhere, and they would be put back up. Horrible, horrible crucifixion, just one of the worst forms of torture. So they would, after the Shabbats would be over, the convocations would be over, they'd be put back up until they died. That's why Pilate, when he heard the news, that Yahusha had already died, he couldn't believe it, because most of them didn't die that quickly, not in 6 hours. That's why he sent the centurion back to the crucifixion site to make sure that he was. And then the centurion brought the word back to Pilate, yes, indeed, he is dead. That is when Pilate released the body to Joseph. So it doesn't matter which group of Jews it would be. They would both make those preparations so that the body can come off the tree. The body cannot stay on the tree all night till the next day. It can't. It has to come off the tree. That's a stipulation.
Okay. I just don't know what to do with this phrasing here, that when this is being asked from Pilatos, it says that it's a preparation day. It's the preparation day.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what to do with that.
Okay, so remember,
we're saying that
in my introduction to the audience, remember I said preparation day is used 6 times in the Gospels. It's used 3 times in the book of John. When it says preparation day, it is always the covenant Passover. So now you can compare that to verse 42. Compare what you just read with verse 42, and you'll see it says something a little bit different.
It says that it's the preparation day of the Jews.
Of the Jews.
Of the Jews.
Mm.
Yeah. See, John in 19 verse 14, he announces, and it was the preparation of the Pesach, that is the covenant calendar, that starts at dawn. So that brings us up to 31. Therefore, since it was the preparation, they're still confirming it's the preparation. This is when Yahushua was still hanging on the tree, that the bodies should not remain on the stake on the Shabbat. They understood this, that his body must be taken off at night, because the coming Shabbat at next dawn was coming. And
so you're saying that this is a preparation a covenant calendar preparation day
In
in John.
verse 31 is covenant calendar preparation.
But in verse 42, you're saying it's a lunar calendar language.
Yes, because as we read in Leviticus 23, Yahuwah says, even these are my feasts. And after the seventh day Shabbat, the Passover is listed next as his feast. And yet John writes here, it's the preparation of the Yahudim. What's a preparation? The preparation is the day before the unleavened bread convocation, or Shabbat. So that's Abib 14. So when we read, because it's the preparation of the Yahudim, we understand that's Abib 14. And that only starts at sunset, on their sunset.
I don't know, I'm having issues reading the Greek text.
Okay,
Because
so
in the Greek text,
but let's back up to verse 14. Just let me give you some
verse 14,
and then you can see in verse 14, it says, I'm in the New King James. Now it was the preparation day. See that? It doesn't say the Jews' preparation day. You see that? It just says preparation day of the Passover and about the 6th hour. This is the 6th hour from midnight. And Yahusha's standing before Pilate just at the early.
So now John is mixing the covenant calendar with the Roman timing.
Yes, he is showing you that Yahusha was standing before Pilate, basically 6 a.m., 6 hours from midnight on Roman reckoning, but this is at Boker for covenant calendar. This is at Boker. But he says preparation day. He does not say Jews' preparation day. That's the key. Okay. So when you look at verse 31, again, he says it was the preparation day. That's covenant calendar Passover day. Then when you look at verse 42, now he's specifying this is the Jews' preparation day. This is the unbelieving Jews. Their preparation day is coming on. Just like in John 7 about tabernacles, it says the Jews' Feast of Tabernacles. It doesn't just say Sukkot or tabernacles. So when John specifies it's the Jews' preparation day, then you know it's on the lunar calendar. Otherwise, you cannot make these verses, verse 14, 31, and 42. You cannot make them work. Does not work any other way. Have to understand there's two groups of Jews, and you have to figure out which ones he's talking about by the context.
In chapter 2, John identifies the feast of the Pesach of the Yahudim. Now, chapter 2, verse 13, he identifies the lunar calendar there also. So this one here in chapter 19 isn't the first time.
No.
Also in chapter 11, verse 55, now the Pesach of the Yahudim was near. So he uses that identification multiple times. He identifies the lunar calendar of the Jews clearly.
Mm-hmm.
That's in direct opposition, in direct contrast to the feast of Yahuwah, Pesach of Yahuwah.
See, what happens, Maria, is when you finally have the eyes to see that there's two groups of Jews. There's believers and unbelievers. And also later on, we're going to see there's two groups of women, okay? When you start to see that, then the Gospels are going to read differently. You're going to see these things pop out. But for us, for many years, like we didn't find this until about 2019. But for many years, we didn't understand. The problem is that verse 31 and 42 in John 19 are problem verses if you don't understand there's two different groups. You can't make it work. It's a 12-hour offset because there's two Passovers just side by side. Now, even if the lunar Passover was 24 hours later, the verses still wouldn't work. It only works with the 12-hour. Only with the 12-hour.
See what you mean.
It takes a little bit of adjusting to realize and understand that there was two groups of Jews. Some believers, very few, and a bigger percentage were non-believers. And they're both written into John 19.
Yeah.
Well, so in that verse 31, so it's the day of preparation, the Sabbath of unleavened bread is approaching, but that's not why they wanted why these unbelieving Jews asked Pilate to have their legs broken. Because because those Jews just wanted the legs broken so that a body isn't remaining on the cross at night. Because in Deuteronomy 21, verse 22, it says, if a man is committing a crime punishable by death and is put to death, and you hang him on a tree, his body shall not remain all night on the tree, but you shall bury him that same night.
Mm-hmm.
So these Jews would have wanted him to be taken, to make sure he's taken off the cross, I guess, because they probably, right?
Mm-hmm. And lots of them wanted them off the tree before sunset, because their Sabbath started at sunset.
Or even just, you don't leave a man, even if it isn't a Sabbath, you don't leave them on the, I'm kind of seeing
These were the believing Jews, and they wanted the statutes upheld for Yahushua Mashiach in perfection. They understood that when he said it has been accomplished, they understood these statutes had to be fulfilled perfectly, and they were doing their best to make sure of it.
Oh, I thought you said they were the unbelieving Jews.
Yeah.
And as far as I'm concerned, all of them would have been on the same page with this, because they would have known that statute.
Okay.
All of them would have been on the same page with that statute. It's easy to find. Deuteronomy 21 verses 22 and 23. It's really easy to find.
And the other part of this is when he died so fast, so quickly, that was part of his words when he said, it has been accomplished. That was spoken into future fulfillment, because he died and then it was fulfilled that his legs were not broken. Why? Because he died quickly so that they didn't break his legs. It's a prophecy spoken into that was fulfilled. That's one of the miracles of this. It's absolutely phenomenal.
That is probably one of the most important questions, Maria, for this part of the study, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see the problem with other people, because if we're saying that in the Gospels the calendars switch between verses, even in one chapter, between verses we have different timings, and then I can see the ground for a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
But it only happens in John. As far as I remember, this, you don't see what we're seeing here in the first three, Matthew, Mark, and Luke. It's only in John. He's the one that gets the details in there. So because we haven't read of these events just like this in the first three Gospels, we're not expecting it. So a lot of people don't expect to see this in John. That's why so many avoid John when it comes to these kinds of details, because they don't know what to do with it. But it's a calendar. It's a calendar issue. It's a calendar problem, and John is the one that answers the calendar problem. The other three don't.
We do see the difference actually in Luke 2, where Luke is recorded about the authority of Yahusha when he was 12 years old, and then after, when he was found 3 days later in the tabernacle, 3 days after the Jewish feast. We see the difference in declaration of to whose authority he was under at that point. The difference between the lunar calendar and the covenant calendar. It's not as clearly defined as here in John, though. John is written clearly.
But that Luke 2 is when he's 12 years old. That is a Passover when he's 12. Luke doesn't have that clear definition at his crucifixion.
Yeah.
And that's a different calendar. That is a lunar calendar that they used calculating that sliver moon before the equinox, not after.
Okay. All right. Well, I need to read. I need to read again.
Can you read out of your Greek version, John 16:31, out of your Greek version? Sometimes it's a little
16.
bit 19, not 16, 19:31. The one that you were talking.
Yes, I was here. 31. Yes, I'm reading it. You want me to read it out loud in Greek?
I read it out loud. I just want to compare it to what mine is saying.
Ιούν Ιουδαίοι ή να μη μείνει επί του σταυρού τα σώματα εν το Σαββάτο, επί Παρασκευή ειν γαρ μεγάλη ημέρα εκείνου του Σαββάτου. Ρώτησαν τον Πιλάτων, «Ήνα κατεαγώσιν αυτόν τα σκέλη και αρθρώσιν».
What does that mean in English?
It says, the Jews, so that the bodies wouldn't stay on the cross on a Sabbath, because it was the preparation day, and it was a big day. That Sabbath was a big day. They asked Pilatus to break the legs and the arthrosis, and the junction, not the junction, how you call them, like the knees, the joints, the legs and joints. That's what it says.
Okay. Just reads in a little bit of a different order, but everything is still there.
How is it in the English version? Can you read the English version?
Yeah, well, this is New King James. Maybe Tim can read from the scriptures, but New King James says, therefore, because it was the preparation day, that the bodies should not remain on the cross on the Sabbath, for that Sabbath was a high day. The Jews asked Pilate that their legs might be broken and that they might be taken away.
Yeah, there's nothing about taking away in the Greek text.
Oh,
just to break the legs and the joints. That's it.
Oh, okay.
No taking away.
Oh, okay. So the taking away would be the removal, because they removal off the cross or the tree, because by statute, the body is not allowed to stay there. Body's not allowed to
Yeah, but that's an addition.
Mhm.
That's an addition in the English version.
Interesting.
This explanation, I mean, doesn't exist in the Greek
Oh.
text.
Okay.
That's in your version. Is it the cross there, or is it a stake?
Or a tree.
It's a cross.
Yeah. We talked about that before. Tim, do you have the scriptures? What does it say in your verse 31?
Basically the exact same thing, only it says the stake.
Oh, okay.
I do believe it was a tree. I do. I don't believe it was a cross.
Yeah.
About that, unfortunately, I cannot find that video again. I lost it, and I'm really angry with myself that I lost it. I watched like a presentation about the Greek words about the cross and the tree, and it separates them. And then I went into my lexicons and I verified that when you read in the Greek text the word xylon, epixilu kremamenos, for example, xylon is not a tree. Xylon is a dead tree. So when you read xylon, the word xylon, and not the word dendro, which dendro is the Greek word for a tree. Xylo is the Greek word for wood, for a log. So when you read xylon, it means it's a dead tree. So it means it's a piece of wood of a tree that has died, and now we have formed it into something, into a tool or into something. I've lost you, or I've lost him. We've lost him.
No, I'm
You're frozen.
I'm frozen.
No, you're here.
So yeah, unfortunately, I can't find it now. But that was just a general comment that I found out. But here in this verse, it doesn't say either Vedro nor Xylo. It says cross, Stavros, in this specific verse in John.
Interesting.
Well, whether it's cross or tree, it doesn't change the calendar.
It doesn't change a thing. No.
Which is the point of the study.
It doesn't change a thing. No.
Yeah.
It doesn't change a thing anyway. In whatever you believe. I mean, it doesn't matter if he was nailed on a tree or on a cross or on a pail. It doesn't matter. I mean, what he did on a tree, on a pail, or on a cross. It's irrelevant, to me, at least.
He died. He died, and he
saved us all. Yes. So
finished up
where he was hanging on, it's irrelevant to me.
Yeah, that part of the plan of salvation was completed.
Yeah.
Part 1.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we haven't done any work with you on John chapter 7, and that's really an exciting chapter. But in that chapter, his brothers are asking him to come up to the feast of the Jews, the tabernacles. Yeah. It says it. Yeah. The Jews' tabernacles, okay? And he says, I'm not going. My time is not yet. I'm not going. And he didn't. He didn't go until the middle of the feast. But the thing is that what we realized is that he does not go to Jerusalem for any lunar feasts whatsoever. If he's going to go, he's not going to be on time. He's not going to sanction with his presence on time on their feast because it's not his anyway. Okay. But he did go halfway through to teach because he knew multitudes of people would be there. But when he said, my time is not yet, it is not yet, he knew that his time to go to Jerusalem for a covenant calendar festival was going to be when he was going to give his life. And it was going to be so...
Darlene, that's John chapter 7. Do you remember approximately the verse?
Oh,
where
yes.
It says, my time
Tim knows all the verses. and we might have to do this, it's because John 7, what we're feeling right now is John 7 is probably the most important chapter in all the Gospels. So, Tim.
Let's go real quick. John 7, verse 1. And after this, Yahushua was walking into Galilee, for he did not want to walk in Yehuda because the Yahudim were seeking to kill him. Verse 2. And the festival of the Yahudim was near, the festival of Sukkot. So right away, you know, or understand that it was on the lunar calendar. So his brothers said to him, get away from here and go into Yehuda so that your Talmudim also see the works that you are doing. For no one acts in secret while he himself seeks to be known openly. If you do these things, show yourself to the world. For even his brothers did not believe in him. They were doubted him. They wanted, show yourself, show us who you are. Come on, do something. We want to stand beside you and be famous, basically. Verse 6. Yahushua therefore said to them, my time has not yet come, but your time is always ready. That word ready is etymos. We know that word. We heard that word. It's always ready. It's always adjustable. He knew exactly what they did with their calendar. It is impossible for the world to hate you, but it hates me because how? My sandals bear witness of it. No, that's not what it says, but I bear witness of it. What did he do? What is his actions? You know, it's sometimes his sandals speak much louder than his words. I bear witness of it that its works are wicked. How do we know that? You go up to this festival. I am not yet going up to this festival. For my time, my appointment is not yet been filled. Drop down to, oh no, let's jump verse 11. The Yahudim, this is their feast of the Yahudim. The Yahudim therefore were seeking him at the festival and said, where is he? They knew the statutes. They knew a male must be at the festival. He must appear in the tabernacle before Yahuwah according to statutes. That's where they're saying, where is he? If he is the Mashiach, why is he not here? Verse 12, and there was much grumbling about him among the crowd. Some were saying he is good. Others were saying, no, he's leading the crowd astray. However, no one spoke openly of him for fear of the Yahudim. Now, verse 14, and about the middle of the festival, Yahusha went up into the Megdash and he was teaching. If he went up into the middle of Yahuwah's festival, he was AWOL. He had not presented himself before the Father in the tabernacle as according to statute. So this tells you right now that either Yahusha HaMashiach is authentic and he is without sin, or he is a sinner. That's the decision we have to place on this verse right here. How come he was allowed to go up to this feast of the Yahudim and he's still declaimed without sin? Because it's on the lunar calendar. It's not his feast. He's bearing witness of it, that its works are wicked. Go up to verse 19. This is at the feast. This is at their lunar-based feast. The scribes and the Pharisees are questioning him. Verse 19. Did not Moshe give you the Torah? Yet not one of you does the Torah. Not one of you. This is at their feast. The context is timing of the feasts. And he's telling them, not one of you is according to the statutes. Not one of you is on the Torah. So when people tell you that Yahusha kept the feasts of the Jews, the very, very simplest way is to go to this chapter and show them, no. If he was keeping the feasts of Jews, he's a sinner and we do not have salvation. It's that simple. If he was keeping the lunar feasts, he's a sinner. We do not have salvation. His sandals speak. That's why you see in the studies, I go back to the sandals so many times. Are you listening to his sandals?
Yeah. Okay.
That's in a nutshell, a big time nutshell.
Yes, a lot of people don't understand, or they don't remember maybe, that it is a statute and a command in Exodus 23 that all males were to appear before Yahuwah for the 3 feasts and to be on time and to bring their offering. There was no provision made for them to come late or to come halfway through. Now, the women and the children didn't have to go, but the men were required to go. And Yahusha, being the most important man that ever walked this earth and the one that gave the statutes and the judgments, would have to abide by them.
Yeah. That's why it's recorded in verse 11. The Yahudim were saying, where is he?
Mm-hmm.
You're Messiah, you should be here.
Mm-hmm.
They were deceived.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that 12-hour offset becomes a little bit clearer for you. When you see those triangles come in and shows you the light seasons, how they overlapped the covenant calendar and the different actions that we're taking on the different dates on the same light season and same night season, but different dates. It's pretty interesting.
Yeah. Now, when you align the lunar cycles with the Tabernacles feast, that would have been about 6 months before that, along with covenant calendar, the covenant tabernacles, or Sukkot, was actually finished before the lunar tabernacles actually began. It was finished. So, excuse me. So we've done all that alignment, just like you've seen all of the other linear calendars where we aligned them. It's really easy to go and find the lunar cycles. It's really easy to figure out, count out their months. You have to count them out. It's a little bit more tricky than the covenant calendar, but you can do it. Anybody can do it. We've done that already. with counting out all those years from 26 to 34 on those different calendars. We've shown people how to count. Can do this for John 7. It's not hard. But Yahuwah's festival was done and over with before theirs even started. So, and he doesn't have to go to Jerusalem because they're not celebrating covenant tabernacles. So they're still apart. But by the time you get 6 months down the road, the lunar cycle is now, for their calendar, is only 12 hours after covenant calendar. It's just amazing, you know, like what Tim says in Bereshit, in beginning, in Genesis 1:1, in the beginning, in that word Bereshit. Everything was laid out right there in Genesis 1. Everything was laid out for the whole plan of salvation, right down to the minute. It's amazing.
It's amazing.
7,000 years of detail, infinite detail that we don't even have ability to comprehend was laid out in that word, Bereshit.
Mm. 7,000 years, eh?
Well, for sure, the first 6,000. So next time, we would like to, if you wish, to keep going on this Passion Week because we're not done. We're just now, we've just got to the Boker of the weekly Shabbat. Okay, that's where we're at. And Tim, I think you're taking it through to Mary Magdalene or somewhere in that area. We're going to pass through what happened on the day of the weekly Shabbat. And there's going to be a lot of things happening there, the resurrection, etc., and all the way up to Mary Magdalene. And so that will, you know, because this whole Passion Week has this 12-hour offset on every single day.
Yeah.
So that would be the next part.
Great. Okay. Because I have questions about the ladies. It seems as if the 4 different gospels give conflicting accounts about the ladies. So it's nice that we're gonna go through them and you know line them up so it makes sense as one story and not 4 different stories with different people at the different times. And yeah.
Well, you're right about that. But which one of the gospels do you think is going to straighten it out?
John.
Yeah, that's right.
A wild guess.
It'll be John.
Yeah.
All right. Great. Kim, do you have anything to add or comment or no? No. Okay. That's okay.
Hit the recording.
Yeah.
I guess we're done. Yeah.
Yeah,
Good night.
we're done.